Yo guys, what is up? And we are here with another video, and we are on chapter 7. Dang, we're actually getting pretty far. When I look at the book, we're about a quarter way through, so I'm getting really excited because once we get closer, it gets really fun. Because I've read this book probably 10 times, because sometimes after reading it, I go and read it after reading a chapter because I want to know more. So today's book suggestion is Restart. I don't know actually I do know who it's by, but I can't remember their names. And I have to read it because it's something for the start of the school year, so I have to read it, which defeats the purpose of books. Like being forced to read a book just isn't the same as reading a book. You know, like for example, if you're being forced to listen to this video or if you're wanting to listen to this video. Okay, so chapter 7. I'll read you the last page of chapter 6 because it's been a little while. She strained her neck until she saw a sliver of the spy's face. White hair, wrinkled skin, a torn shawl over her thin shoulders. Zara's throat kinched like a belt. It wasn't her uncle. It was Miss Tally. Dun dun dun! Anyway, so Miss Tally's just been caught by the Nazis, and we're about to see what happens. Chapter 7. Blood drained from Zara's face. No, she whispered. Oh God, no. This couldn't be happening. After the mission last night, Zara had made sure that they hadn't been followed. She destroyed that security camera too, hadn't she? Bastian found her in the crowd. Had he followed her from school? But he abruptly stopped when he saw the stage. Who is that poor woman? He said, so only Zara could hear. Zara didn't answer him. Her gaze scrambled across the mass of Klimbrun, searching wildly for her uncle. But she could barely see 10 feet in front of her. The square was filled to capacity, with onlookers on every corner and soldiers out in full force. 100 guards had been positioned throughout the square, marked by their green uniforms along with half a dozen sentinels. One of them scaled the courthouse facade like a four-limbed spider, while Sentinel Akin flew overhead in a tight circle. A few of the German children pointed at him and clapped. Zara focused back on the stage, filled with panic. She pushed forward. Miss Tally! Please, you mustn't make a scene, Bastian said into her ear. He cautiously tugged at her elbow. There's nothing we can do to stop this. Don't say that, Zara snapped before she remembered who she was speaking to. She started mumbling an apology, but Bastian interrupted it. Believe me, Fraulein. Without realizing it, he touched the dog tag around his neck. There's nothing left to do. You'll only get arrested yourself. Zara shook her head. She wouldn't believe that, and she couldn't understand why Bastian was looking out for her. He had hardly spoken a word to her in all the years she worked at the academy, but now he was treating her like a friend? Ignoring him, Zara squeezed deeper into the morass of townspeople. She might have stood by while Mr. Carey was getting beaten, but she wouldn't repeat that mistake. Miss Tally was her friend, maybe her only friend after the Nazis had slaughtered Molly, and Zara refused to do nothing while the Nazis cut her to pieces. But Bastian's warning echoed through her mind. Hundreds of people now packed the square, and with Nazis in every corner, how could she and Miss Tally ever escape? An armored SUV pulled up to the square, and the soldiers shouted for everyone to quiet down. Only then did Colonel Eckhart step out of the car and proceed onto the stage, with a megaphone held to his mouth. Heil Hitler! Sieg Heil! Sieg Heil! The masses chanted like drones. Today, I speak to the Klimbrun of Greenfield, he said, sweeping his frigid gaze across the crowd. A few days ago, as many of you witnessed, we arrested a man who spoke treason against Führer. It troubles me greatly that you continue to disrespect his rule. How ungrateful you are. Yeah, ungrateful that they didn't have freedom? Let's see. The Germans in the square, clad in their pressed suits and tailored dresses, nodded their heads. But the tattered, clothed laborers exchanged glances with neighbors, yet none of them dared raise a voice in protest. My soldiers have discovered a criminal on Mist, a traitor. Colonel Eckhart pointed a long finger at Miss Tally. A spy for the Alliance. Zara choked on her breath, still bewildered at what was unfolding in front of her. Miss Tally had always been so careful. Maybe not to the extent of Uncle Red, but she'd always cautiously stowed her Alliance radio and kept her house free of treasonous documents. The Nazis must have set her up for this crime. That was the only explanation Zara could think of. Colonel Eckhart pointed the megaphone at Miss Tally's face. "This woman, Nella Tally, has committed the offense of stealing from Fort Goring. Do you deny this?" He prodded Miss Tally, digging hard against her side. Miss Tally said nothing. She fixed her gaze ahead, standing with her back straight, despite the blood trickling from her nose. The Nazis' work, most likely. Zara tried to catch her eye, but she wasn't tall enough to see over the people in front of her. "Do you not deny the footage we recorded of you? Our security cameras don't lie." Colonel Eckhart smiled like a cat that had trapped a fat mouse. "We've hidden them throughout our properties to catch traitors like you." Struggling to breathe, Zara braced herself against the woman next to her. He threw her a nasty scowl and backed away. Zara regained her balance, but sheer panic was rolling through her. Had she missed another camera during the supply run? No, that couldn't be it. If there had been another camera on top of the shed or the hospital, then she would be up on that stage as well. Then the realization dawned on her. The Nazis must have hidden another camera inside the storage shed where Miss Tally had taken the supplies. Zara may have destroyed one device, but she hadn't destroyed the one that counted the most. Nausea swam through her stomach. Zara had been so sure that she and Miss Tally had gotten away with their mission, that they had outsmarted the Nazis. She'd walked around all day with a spring in her step, so proud of what she had done. But she had been so stupid. Colonel Eckhart shoved Miss Tally onto her knees and kicked her bad hip. Anguish spread over her face, but Miss Tally didn't cry out. He continued, "And now for the greater charges. Do you refute your involvement with the Alliance?" He waited for Aunt to answer and slapped her when she didn't. A red mark exploded across Miss Tally's cheek, but she remained silent. "We found the rebel radio during a sweep of your home. Are you going to tell me that it wasn't yours?" Ask for mercy, Zara thought, desperate. She knew Miss Tally would never do so, but maybe the colonel would take pity on a widow. There had to be a tiny kernel of compassion inside him. The colonel continued his pacing. "I take your silence for acquiescence, then." His white smile spread wider, and Zara knew that there would be no mercy. There wasn't a speck of it in his Nazi bones. "The punishment for your crimes is death." A cry tore from Zara's throat before she could stifle it. "No, please!" She stopped herself as a hush fell over the crowd. Her blood turned to frost as Colonel Eckhart searched the massive group, hunting for a source of the outburst. But then more shots rang through the square. Zara's cry had caught on. "Set her free! Release her!" The murders hit a crescendo. Some people booed while others threw their shoes at the stage. Towards the back of the square, a group of miners shoved their way forward. Almost every clean block in Greenfield knew Miss Tally. She's the only midwife for 30 miles. For years she had delivered screaming babies for factory workers and farm hands, for the poorest of the poor, who could only pay her in pennies and favors. Those boos grew into a chorus. "There will be order," Colonel Eckhart said. He nodded at his guards. Throughout the square, soldiers knocked their rifle butts into the workers and pointed their muzzles at any naysayers. One of the guards marched toward Bastian and Zara, chewing a fat wad of tobacco and pointing at Zara's nose. "You, I saw you yelling," he barked, his tone filled with bile. He swung his rifle at Zara's head. Before she could even wince, the butt of the weapon smacked against her temple. Zara's vision flashed white, then blurred. The right side of her head exploded in agony, making her legs crumple. She landed hard on her knees. Her hand flew to the side of her head. There was no blood, nothing broken. Yet the pain had knocked the breath out of her. "Watch your mouth, Unterschmiss." I have no idea how to say that. It's Untermensch. No idea. Anyway, the soldier said before he stalked away. Once the soldier was out of earshot, Bastian glanced at Zara in worry. "You should stay down. It's safer that way." Zara refused to sit, not until Miss Tally was safe. Somehow she had to get her friend off that stage before the Nazis slaughtered her. Stumbling onto her feet, she ignored the throbbing in her head and watched as Colonel Eckhart motioned towards his SUV. A female sentinel emerged from the car. She stood over 6 feet tall, with blonde hair that lay in neat braids down her back, reminiscent of a schoolgirl, but there was nothing girlish about her. Zara's knees trembled. She had seen the sentinel on television before, standing right there next to Führer as a member of the Corps of Four. What was she doing here? Sentinel Braun. Colonel Bastian's jaw clenched at this female sentinel. The Protector, as she was known, strode onto the stage alongside his father, her blonde head tilted high. She looked just as confused as Zara. Should he be? No, he looked. Sebastian looked. She should be with the Führer, shouldn't she? The colonel raised his megaphone as if he had heard his son's question. I am pleased to introduce Sentinel Petra Braun, one of the most essential members of the German Anomaly Division. She arrived in the capital yesterday to train sentinels there, and she was gracious enough to spare a few hours with Fort Göring's anomaly troops. Before she departs back to Berlin, she insists on attending this execution. Sentinel Braun nodded and waved the audience like she was a foreign dignitary receiving an award. Zara's head thudded all over again, and she went over her grim options. She could grab Miss Tally and fly them both out of the city, but the soldiers, especially Sentinel Akin, would be in close pursuit, or she could send a gale force wind to the stage and knock down the guards, but there would be over 100 armed Nazis in the square today. She couldn't fight all of them. And what about her uncle? If she and Miss Tally fled over Greenfield, Colonel Eckhart would be sure to arrest him. Despair clawed up Zara's throat. There had to be a way to save Miss Tally, but each idea wilted in front of her. On stage, Colonel Eckhart and Sentinel Braun exchanged a few words, causing the colonel to grin gleefully. Turned back to his audience to announce, in the name of the Führer, Sentinel Braun has asked to perform the execution of self. Heil Hitler! While the German onlookers clapped and cheered, Zara couldn't move. Sentinel Braun was a fire wielder and ice conjurer. Powers like that, Miss Tally would be sure to suffer. And Braun would make the execution as painful as possible. Sentinel Braun approached Miss Tally, the 2 plaits of her hair thumping her back with each step. She ran the gloved finger down her victim's cheek. Guten Tag. Miss Tally didn't blink. I don't fear you, or death. Sentinel Braun laughed. With a terrible smile smeared on her lips, she removed the white gloves and held out her palm, commanding a pillar of flames to spring from her hand. The fire licked thirstily at her skin, lengthening until it spanned the size of a 6-foot whip. Despite her blinding headache, Zara beckoned for the wind. She knew her plan was insane, maybe suicidal, but she had to stop the execution. She couldn't lose anybody else to the Nazis. Sweat gathered on her forehead as she looked at her hands, but she could only muster a puff of breeze. Listen to me, she screamed at the air. Spin! A slight draft blew against her shoulders, but it wasn't enough. The hammer in Zara's head kept smashing against her skull, cutting her connection to the air around her. She glared at her fingers, but it was no use. The Empire will fall! Miss Tally shouted, her voice echoing over the masses. The territories will be free once again! Sentinel Braun released the whip of fire, lashing across Miss Tally's small form. A line of bright welts spread over the wrinkled skin, but the whip didn't stop there. It curled around Miss Tally's frail body, singing off her hair, strangling her with smoke. Miss Tally shrieked. A sob shuddered through Zara. She cried out for the wind, but it was too late. The whip coiled faster and faster until Miss Tally was drenched in orange flames. Her screams drowned out as the pillar burned hotter and hotter, as it towered higher. Arthur! Her voice was fading. Oh, Arthur! That was when Sentinel Braun unleashed her second power, a violent storm of ice. Foot-long icicles hammered into Miss Tally's weakening body until she fell silent. A woman fainted. School children cried. A man sitting not far from Zara started screaming, but a soldier elbowed him in the stomach. Zara's eyes clamped shut. She couldn't hide from that smell, the stench of cooked flesh. She clawed through the masses, fleeing from that terrible scent, but it followed her, clinging to her clothes, lingering beneath her nose. An awful taste climbed into Zara's throat, and as she spilled her lunch onto the sidewalk, people around her jumped back. Sebastian pushed through them and crouched next to her. He pulled a handkerchief from his pocket and pressed it into her hand. "Here, take this," he said. Zara stared at the handkerchief, with his initials embroidered on it. Then she glanced up at him, his hand clenched around the white cloth. But then she forced herself to drop it. She didn't want his help or kindness. Not after what his father had done. "Was Miss Tally a friend of yours?" Just leave me alone." Confusion clouded his eyes. "Pardon?" "Just leave me alone." Zara staggered forward, not caring about propriety. Bastian was a Nazi, born and bred, plain and simple. He was one of them. Without another word, she ran. Zara fled from the square. Around her, screaming chaos continued. The shocked Quinbon, the wailing school children, but she ran past all of it. No matter how fast she urged her legs to go, she couldn't get Miss Tally's cries out of her head. Or that smell. She wanted to scrub her mind clean of them, but she knew she would never forget. Her knees buckled and her hands hit the pavement. Zara didn't get up this time. Her heart wrenched into 1,000 pieces so small that she would never stitch them back together again, because Miss Tally was gone. Zara curled into a ball right there on the street, not caring about the people who had to walk around her. The sobs finally came. Only yesterday, Miss Tally had bustled around the St. James house, cooking dinner and playing rummy. Now, not even a day later, Zara would never see her friend again. Anger bubbled in Zara's chest, and the cut on her thumb from last night began to throb. The stinging started up again, and the same needle pricking she had felt last night. Zara swore. She couldn't deal with an infection right now, not after what she had witnessed. Footfalls struck the cobblestones behind her, but Zara hardly noticed. She looked up in time before she felt a pair of arms engulf her in a tight embrace. It took her a moment to register who it was. "Uncle Red?" she whispered. "Thank God you're all right." He looked her over and winced at the welt on her temple. "Why didn't you stop? I was calling for you." She collapsed against him, something she hadn't done since he was little. "Did you see it? The execution?" "Only the very end. I was over in Ingleside at the livestock auction." Each word came out more hoarse than the last. "I came as soon as I could." Minutes passed before he pulled away. "Let's get you home." Zara gripped onto his arm, blindly stumbling next to him. Each step felt heavier than the last, like walking in tar. Uncle Red had to help her into the truck. His face was paper white as he pulled onto the road. "Try not to think about it," he said. How could she not? Zara shut her eyes, but she could still see the execution. Every little detail. The fire, the smoke, the smell. Zara slammed her fist against her seat, her shock replaced with a surge of anger. How could this happen? Miss Tally was so careful. She was so... 100 words rushed through her thoughts. Smart, good-hearted, and she gave the very best hugs that left you smelling like lavender tea. But the Nazis had killed her anyway. The tears came back. Zara wiped them from her eyes, only to have a new batch replace them. They burned her, Uncle Red. They stabbed her, too. White-hot fury now coursed through her every pore. She could taste the bitterness on her tongue. I couldn't do anything. She was screaming, but I couldn't help her. Her uncle pulled the car over and threw it into a park. His arm wrapped her into another hug. It's going to be all right? How could anything be all right? She twisted free from him and huddled on her side of the cab, her heart splitting in half and then splitting again. This hurts me too, Uncle Red said. His eyes welled. We have to keep going, though. That's what Nell would have wanted. What about the Nazis? Let them get away with this? I know you're angry. Of course I'm angry. They killed Miss Tally over a few stolen supplies and a radio. Listen to me. We have to keep our wits about us, okay? The Nazis are going to make some arrests. We're going to arrange more interrogations, but we have to be cautious. Cautious, Zara seethed. The Nazis murdered Miss Talley and you want me to be cautious? I'm trying to keep you alive. It's only the two of us now. But they killed her! He gripped her shoulders. I told her that I'd care for you, and I'm doing my best to do that. Tears fell from his eyes, and Zara's mouth opened. She never cried, not since Mission Metzger. I lost her, and now Nell's gone. If I lost you next. At the sight of tears, Zara's squall of anger died down. He was talking about her mom, she realized. Her uncle never talked about her mother. It was too painful for him, even all these years later. Zara's heart sank, heavy as an anchor, and she thought of the horrible cards that her uncle had been dealt with in his life. Losing his sister, raising a little girl on his own. Hadn't been easy, and yet she could follow him on his road of caution. She couldn't follow him on his road of caution. Promise me you won't go looking for trouble, he said, his gaze fastening into hers. She saw what the Nazis did now. Zara swallowed. She didn't want to lie to him. Promise me. But she told him what he wanted to hear. I promise. Uncle Red breathed out. His hand slipped from her shoulders and started up the car again. The truck rumbled through the town streets, passing a German family at the bakery who were sharing a slice of streusel cake. Apparently they'd felt like celebrating after the execution. A stiff silence fell inside the vehicle, and Zara rolled her last words over her tongue. I promise. Her gaze fixed on her uncle. She couldn't keep this promise to him, not after what had happened today. 9 years ago, the Nazis had shot her mother dead. And 6 years after that, they had killed her best friend. Now they had executed one of the people she loved most. Zara's nails drilled into her palms. She wouldn't let the Germans get away with this. And that is chapter 7. That was a really good chapter. Next chapter will be chapter 8, which will hopefully be coming out soon. And yeah, so subscribe, like, comment down below, and I will see you guys later. Wait, is there anything else I need to add? No. Anyway, see you guys later. Bye.